Join us as we explore the invisible energy system running just beneath your skin.
Mapping the vital streams that bridge our physical bodies with the deeper planes of life.
I'm Elliot.
And I'm Nadia.
Welcome to the Etheric Double by Arthur E. Powell.
There's a particular kind of tired that isn't tired. You know the one. You take the metro home at rush hour, packed in, shoulder to shoulder with 200 strangers, and you haven't done anything. You've just stood there holding a rail. And you get home absolutely wrung out, scoured, like you've been out in weather. And some evenings, you catch yourself doing a thing nobody taught you. Pulling in, wrapping something around yourself before you even step into the carriage.
Bracing. Everyone does it, and nobody was taught it.
Nobody was taught it. And this episode is where the book says, that instinct is correct. Here's what you're actually doing, and here's how to do it properly. And then it walks through the strangest door in the whole book. Because today is the Seance Room episode. 3 chapters, 19, 20, and 24. Shells and shields, mediumship, and ectoplasm. And they belong together because underneath, they're all one idea. What happens when etheric matter is pushed out of a body? Kept out in the first chapter, drawn out in the second, and studied in the third by a doctor of science with measuring instruments.
And a word on register, since this is the material people either giggle at or get breathless about, and we're doing neither. This audience knows these waters. The book treats all of it as real phenomena to be understood, with real costs to real people, and examined carefully. Curious and calm. That's the whole approach.
Okay, so, chapter 19.
Actually, before we get to chapter 19, just one quick little note. So in this episode, we're going to be doing chapters 19, 20, and 24. And that's just because of a thematic thing. Chapter 24 goes way better with this overall episode. But don't worry, we'll get to the other chapters in the next episode.
Good call out. Thanks, Elliot. Okay, back to it. Chapter 19. And the question here is, when is it actually right to build a wall? Because we've spent 7 episodes celebrating exchange, the shedding, the sharing, the pouring in. And now the book says, sometimes, close the borders.
And its list of sometimes is very recognizable. A mixed crowd, first of all, where the magnetism swirling about may be distasteful to you or actually harmful. Your metro carriage. Then the vampire people, who we met back in the spleen chapter, the ones whose own intake fails, so their system drinks from whoever's near. And the book adds detail here that it withheld before. A capable one, it says, can drain a person of all their strength in a few minutes. And the drain isn't the polite kind. The suction can pull the rose-colored particles out of you before you've even absorbed their prana. Taking the food off your fork.
And still, even here, the book stays kind about them, which I continue to love. It points out the vampire gains almost nothing. Their system dissipates what they take without properly using it. Everyone loses. And it even prescribes for them careful mesmeric treatment. Small measured doses of prana until the elasticity of their double is restored, and the suction and the leaking both stop. Because they're leaking too, the book says, through every pore. They're not a villain. They're a torn bucket.
The rest of the list, quickly. Having to sleep near people whose emanations are coarse or draining, and the book's example is so period perfect I have to give it a railway carriage. Overnight trains, strangers asleep an arm's length away. Then, visiting places where disease is rife, people so sensitive they reproduce the symptoms of the sick around them, which is our empaths from the heart chapter, the wheel turned up too far. And finally, just the battering, the book says, of the incessant vibrations of a noisy city.
So the city tired thing is real. Okay, before the how, the warning, because the book puts it right up front and it's the wisest line in the chapter. An etheric shell that keeps things out also keeps things in.
Including your own emanations. And remember from the discharges chapter, a good part of what you give off is spent, waste. The book flatly calls some of it poisonous. Seal yourself in a perfect bubble, and you're marinating in your own exhaust. So the shell is a tool for a bad hour, not a home, an umbrella you put up in a downpour. Nobody lives under an umbrella.
Up when you need it, down when you don't. And the how?
Will and imagination, the same two engines as everything in these later chapters. And two grades of construction, the simpler way. You take the outer edge of your own etheric aura, that boundary a few inches out where the health aura fades, and you densify it, pack it firm by picturing it firm and willing it so. The better way, and the book says plainly it's harder and takes more knowledge, is to build a proper ovoid shell around yourself out of the loose etheric matter of the surrounding air. Not your own substance, borrowed substance, shaped into an egg of armor around you.
The first one is pulling your coat tight. The second is actual tailoring. And then there's the sleep advice, which comes with the book's little disaster story.
The cautionary tale. So a shell built before sleep can be a real help. While your body lies there, the etheric brain is exposed to every stray thought drifting through the neighborhood, and they mix into your dreams, all that static. A shell keeps the static out. But, the book insists, a sleep shell must be built of etheric matter, not astral. And it records the case of one student who got this wrong. He built himself a beautiful shell of astral matter, which did nothing for his physical body, and instead sealed himself, inside an impenetrable astral bubble. He floated off for the night, locked in his own safe, cut off from absolutely everything, while his body lay unguarded below.
He child-locked himself in the car. It's the best, worst instruction in the book. And there are little shields too, aren't there, for smaller troubles?
Very practical ones. Some sensitive people suffer through the ordinary handshake, every palm a little download they didn't ask for. For them, a temporary local shield, just over the hand and arm, willed into place before the greeting, and nothing comes through.
And then, at the far end of skill, the book explains something that has puzzled travelers for centuries, and that half of us have seen with our own eyes at festivals back home. Firewalking. A layer of etheric matter, the very thinnest layer, can be so worked as to be absolutely impervious to heat. Spread it over the feet or the hands or even over the hot stones themselves, and flesh crosses fire unharmed. And the book says it's the same trick behind sitters at seances handling red-hot coals. The firewalker isn't defying the fire, they're wearing something. One last note for precision, because this book is always precise. These shells are etheric only. They stop etheric traffic, germs, drains, magnetism. They do nothing against astral or mental influence. Thoughts and feelings sail straight through. Different plane, different wall. Okay, chapter 20. And now the door creaks open properly, because having learned how etheric matter is kept in, we meet the people from whom it comes out. Mediums.
And the book's definition is bloodlessly clinical, which sets the tone it wants. A medium is an abnormally organized person in whom the etheric double and the dense body come apart easily. That's it. That's the whole gift in this book's account. Most of us are tightly laced, remember episode 1. In a healthy person, the double can barely be separated at all. A medium's lacing is loose, and when the double is extruded, pushed out, it supplies the physical basis for what the seance room calls materializations.
Okay, so just think about what they were really seeing. When one of those Victorian seances produced a glowing figure by the cabinet, that figure was the medium. It wasn't marble, and it wasn't some sort of a trick of the light. It was a living woman's own finer body, pulled out of her and reshaped.
And everything strange about the phenomena follows from that. The forms stay close to the medium, always, because the matter is hers, and it's constantly being drawn back toward her. Carry the figure too far away, and it collapses, the matter rushing home. Bright light destroys the forms in moments, which we'll understand better in the ectoplasm chapter. And the whole performance is, the book says flatly, dangerous. The double cannot be fully separated from the body without death, because prana can't circulate without etheric matter. So what's extruded is a portion, and the book's phrase for how that portion leaves is grim. The double is rent in twain.
Torn in two. And this is where I want to slow down because this is the part of the chapter the book clearly cares about, and it's not the ghosts, it's the toll. Even a partial withdrawal, it says, brings lethargy, the vital activities nearly suspended, and afterwards, extreme exhaustion. This is why mediums so often collapse when the seance ends. The book compares it to the shock that follows a surgical operation. And then there's the sentence that reframes a whole century of spiritualist history. So many mediums, it says, eventually became drunkards. Because the sudden loss of strength leaves a terrible craving for support, and stimulants answer it and then own it.
The gift came with a bill nobody itemized for them.
And there's a first-hand account of exactly this, from someone you basically really can't argue with. Sir William Crookes, the great chemist and one of the most skeptical people ever to look into this stuff, wrote about the medium Home after they worked together. He describes watching Home lying on the floor, almost fainting, pale and unable to speak. And Crookes wrote that he could hardly doubt it, that producing this psychic force comes with a matching drain on a person's own vital force. He was definitely a serious Victorian scientist, writing down what he watched it cost a person.
The instruments and the invalid in the same room.
And once you've heard that, you can't watch the history the same way. The gaslit seance, the astonished sitters, the table rising, and in the middle of the wonder, a human being spent like fuel. Whatever else was happening in those rooms, someone real was paying for it. The book's compassion here is quiet, but it's absolutely there, and it should be ours too.
Then the mechanics of what the sitters actually saw, and they're fascinating. A clairvoyant present at a seance watches the double ooze from the medium, usually of all details, from her left side. It gathers, and this is the part I find most telling, it's easily molded by the thoughts of the sitters, the people in the circle expecting, hoping, remembering, and the plastic etheric matter takes the shape of whatever fills the room's mind. Usually nobody's doing it deliberately, though it can be done deliberately. Blavatsky herself said that at the famous Eddie Farmstead seances, she consciously molded the appearing forms into different likenesses, and the sitters saw them change.
So the beloved face that formed in the dark. The room may have sculpted it out of the medium, out of its own longing, which is somehow both deflating and more touching than the ghost story. Grief given clay.
And two side notes that explain two old puzzles. Even when the extruded matter is invisible to the eye, it can affect a photographic plate, because the plate is sensitive to wavelengths the eye isn't. That's the book's rationale for spirit photographs, the figures that appeared on negatives beside the living. And etheric matter is drawn not only from the medium, but from the sitters too, which is why people come home from seances feeling flat and emptied. You remember the aggravated vampire note from the spleen chapter. This is that, formalized, everyone in the circle contributing substance without knowing it.
The ticket price nobody was told about. And the danger rules?
Two big ones. Much matter can be withdrawn safely, only in complete passivity. If the medium stirs, tries to assert herself, thinks too actively, the form weakens or snaps back to the cabinet. And, gravely, any attempt by a sitter to seize a materialized form is in the highest degree dangerous, potentially fatal to the medium, because that form is her substance, tethered. Grab it, and something in her is being wrenched. And the physical accounting is astonishing. This was measured. During materializations, dense matter goes too, gases and liquids drawn out of her body. Mediums visibly shrivel. On the scales, a medium's body has weighed as much as 40 pounds lighter during a materialization, with the standing form weighing at least what she lost. There's even a recorded case, the medium Eglinton, where the materialized form picked up and carried the medium's own diminished body.
That last image is going to stay with me for a while. And sometimes there isn't a whole figure at all, is there?
Often not. Sometimes only an etheric hand forms, or just enough fingers to grip a pencil and write, or to rap on wood and shift small objects. That's the book's mechanism for the classic wrappings and moving tables.
Right. And then there's the famous spirit drapery. You know, those flowing white robes you see in all the old pictures, the veils, all of that. The book says that a lot of the time, it's just the medium's own clothes, or a sitter's.
Yep.
The matter borrowed and spun into something new. Sometimes into a cloth finer than any loom on earth could make. Every now and then, a piece of it survives the evening and lasts for years. But most of the time, it just melts away in minutes, like frost off a window. And the book's verdict on the whole practice is careful and double-edged, and both edges matter. On the one hand, it grants what the seance room achieved. Through mediumship, very large numbers of people became convinced that the unseen world is real and that life continues after death. People no scripture could reach. It doesn't sneer at that, and neither will we. But its judgment is still plain. Except possibly in very rare cases, with every precaution, the practice of mediumship is harmful and may be exceedingly dangerous. And it can't resist adding the professional's footnote that a trained occultist would never do it this way. He'd never disturb his own double or anyone else's. He'd condense surrounding ether around his astral body and hold it there by will, borrowing nothing from any living person's body.
The right way costs the maker only effort. The seance way spends the medium. Which brings us to the third chapter, 24, and my favorite person in this entire book. Because into the darkened seance room in the 1910s walks a doctor of science named W.J. Crawford, carrying force-measuring instruments, and he proceeds to study levitating tables the way you'd study a crane.
Tell us the word first.
Ectoplasm, Greek, ektos, outside, plasma, that which is molded outside the body. It's the name for the matter, mainly etheric, that exudes from a medium and gets used for the phenomena. So this chapter is the same subject as the last one, but instead of the clairvoyance view, it's the engineers. Crawford sat with a circle, the medium fully conscious the whole time, that detail matters, and treated table lifting and wrapping purely as problems of mechanics. And by deduction from his instruments, he worked out what had to be happening. And then, years later, he confirmed his deductions by direct sight and by photography. Deduce first, verify after. It's proper method, and the book gives him real respect. And so do I.
And what did the instruments say?
That the ectoplasm flowing out of the medium is shaped, he says, by unseen operators into rods, actual structural members, each rod anchored at one end in the medium's body and gripping the object at the other end by suction, like a soft clamp. Psychic force is then applied along the rod, and the table moves, or the rap sounds, with nobody touching anything. He measured rods from 1/2 inch across up to 7 or 8 inches. The free end can be flat or curved, and it can present soft as a baby's flesh or hard as iron, on demand. A rod will conduct high-tension electricity. He discharged an electroscope through one, yet it resists a low-tension current. He laid one across a bell circuit, and the bell stayed silent.
And to the touch, for the people who felt one in the dark?
Clammy, cold, the book says reptilian, almost oily, and white light destroys the structures, instantly, which is the real reason, in this account, for the darkened seance room and the red lamp. Red light doesn't harm them. It was never theater. It was material science.
The Gothic staging turns out to be a handling requirement. And the mechanics themselves, this is the part that made you pace around the room. So, go on.
Because it's proper statics. 2 methods, and they leave different signatures on the scales. Method 1, the rod runs from the medium straight to the table, a cantilever, like a bracket shelf. And if you weigh the medium while a table is levitated that way, her weight increases by about 95% of the table's weight. The load is being carried through the rod into her body. She is, mechanically, holding the table up. Method 2, the rod goes from the medium down to the floor first, braced, and works like a lever. Then the load path runs to the floor, and the medium actually gets lighter by the weight of the ectoplasm that's left her to form the structure. Crawford measured her losing 35.5 pounds, while a braced structure was under stress. On one occasion, unstressed, 54.5 pounds, nearly half her body weight, standing out of her, in the dark, as scaffolding.
nearly half of her out of her body and holding up furniture. And the dye trick. Finish with the dye trick, it's the cleverest thing in the chapter.
The staining method. Ectoplasm, it turns out, picks up powdered carmine, a red dye, and carries it. So Crawford laid dye in its path and then followed the color, like tracing a leak by putting dye in the water. And the trail showed the ectoplasm issuing from the lower part of the medium's trunk, flowing down her legs, in between stocking and shoe, and back up again at the end, returning. It even tore threads out of her stockings and carried them across the room and dropped them in a dish of clay. He mapped the circulation of the invisible with a packet of red powder.
And alongside Crawford, there's the photographic study, the German one.
Baron von Schrenck-Notzing, a Munich physician, whose enormous book on materialization phenomena came with about 200 photographs, summarized by the Paris physiologist Gustave Gelée.
And their description of the substance itself, at close range, is the passage I had to read twice. It emerges amorphous, as ductile dough, a shaking jelly, threads, cords, a membrane, sometimes something like woven fabric. White, gray, or black, sometimes all three at once. Faintly luminous. Cold to the touch, viscous, moving with this creeping reptilian motion. And painfully sensitive. Touch the substance and the medium feels it. Put a pin in it and she cries out across the room. It comes from the body's openings and extremities, most often the mouth. And then, their phrase, it has an irresistible tendency toward organization. It doesn't want to stay dough. It becomes fingers with nails, hands, faces.
And then there are the seized samples, which are the strangest sentences in the book, so they deserve to be heard exactly as reported. On the occasions when investigators managed to seize a piece of a materialized form and keep it, here's what analysis found. Once, 2 pieces of what the microscope identified as human skin. Once, a few milliliters of a colorless, slightly cloudy liquid, which turned out to be cell debris and saliva. Once, a bundle of hair, not matching the medium's. That's the report. Make of it what you will, the book essentially says, and what I make of it is that the substance is exactly what the whole account claims. Bodily, human, borrowed from a living person and returned.
Not moonlight after all. Never moonlight. It was always somebody. And that's the thread through all 3 of these chapters, isn't it? That's what holds the uncanny corner of the book together. Etheric matter can leave a body, and when it does, real, strange, measurable things happen. Tables rise, forms walk, dye travels. But it is always somebody's substance. There is always a cost, and the cost always comes home to a person. Which is why the chapter about walls came first. The book taught us to shield before it showed us the seance.
Protection first, phenomena second. It's good parenting structurally.
And next episode might be my favorite premise remaining, because after all this seeing done by clairvoyance, we meet a man who tried to see the aura with no clairvoyance at all. Dr. Walter Kilner, a London hospital physician with colored glass screens and endless patients, mapping the health aura in a laboratory. The lab coat and the third eye, side by side, describing the same thing. Seeing the unseen next time.
It's the chapter where the 2 halves of this whole book shake hands. And if this show speaks to you, it's part of a growing family of shows over at Pillar 5 Media.
Different hosts, different books, all of us taking something deep and trying to make it feel like a conversation with a friend.
You'll find all of them at pillar5media.com. That's pillar, then the number 5 as a numeral, media.com.
Thanks for walking the strange corridor with us today. Put your umbrella up when you need it this week.
And take it down after. Nobody lives under an umbrella. We'll catch you in the next one.